All right, guys, I want to look at some theoretical explanations to underdevelopment. If you look at my previous lecture on the nature of the political economy of many African countries at the time of independence, you would come to the realization and appreciation of the fact that these economies were severely underdeveloped. But before we look at the various strategies that were put in place or have been instituted since independence to date to bring about development and to help us fight the quagmires of poverty and underdevelopment, I want us to interrogate a few theoretical explanations to underdevelopment. I'll be very brief and snappy on these explanations so that it serves as a guide to you as you read further on them. I want to talk about the dependency modernization theory. I would also talk about Asimoglu and Robinson's knowledge and geographical location theory, plus their argument on institutions. And I think the bit about the institutionalist explanations to underdevelopment, I have a full lecture on which I may so skip, and you can easily refer to that lecture. When we talk about the dependency theory, essentially it is a theory that attributes our underdevelopment to the fact that we've been segmented, or the whole world system has been divided into countries that belong to global core countries, and then others belonging to the peripheral countries. Developed countries are countries that are seen as belonging to the core, and then Africa and other developing countries are countries that are seen to be located in the periphery of the world system. And the challenge has been that these African countries that belong to the global south and at the periphery are always the producers and exporters of raw materials whose export prices they do not even determine. And in exchange, they import finished products whose pricing are always predetermined by countries at the core. And so Africa is exporting raw cocoa beans or cocoa seedlings without refining it too much. And then when you are exporting, you meet a lot of restrictions. When you are exporting, the one you are exporting to determines your pricing for your export. Because we've not also been able to form producer cartels amongst ourselves as developing countries, we are unable to agree on common pricing. So you export your products, and then they give you a determined price, very low price. And after you've exported, we have the penchant for buying imported products and foreign goods and already finished goods. So we import them, and these come to us at very expensive pricing, and we the importers have no control over the pricing. And so you always are saddled with the balance of payment, deficit problems. You are exporting little, and you are exporting raw materials that are not refined, and you are importing more of finished products that have are priced very high. And so oftentimes you need all your monies to go and import it. You cannot develop as a country, as a continent, if you are plagued with this particular challenge. The dependency theory makes a great point about the cause of underdevelopment. But yes, because it's true that many of us in Africa, many African countries, are just exporters of primary goods and importers of finished goods whose pricing they don't control. But others control or determine the pricing for your primary products that you export. It's a great explanatory variable or theory to Africa's underdevelopment. But the point must also be made that it is an explanation that is oftentimes touted by many African leaders in a manner that takes them out of the picture as also potential or as also actual contributors to Africa's underdevelopment. You cannot blame all others apart from yourself in your quest to explain underdevelopment. So the challenge or the critique has been that the theory tends to blame foreigners and outsiders as being the cause of our woes, and rather than blaming our own institutions, our own leaders, and our own nature of politics, also as being contributory factors. You cannot succeed as a developing country if you are blaming all others as being the cause of your problem, and then you are not taking part of the problem, because I can tell you that most of the challenges confronting Africa and other developing countries are challenges that are caused by ourselves and not challenges caused by others. Now, there's also the modernization theory. The modernization theory that tries to also explain our underdevelopment simply says that we are underdeveloped because our culture contains values that are backward, values and belief systems and practices that are saddled with superstitions and other inhuman and barbaric practices that tends to retrogress us rather than making us progressive as a people. To some extent, they also make a great point. Yes, we tend to have negative cultural practices and belief system, whereas we need a large tract of land to farm. In our part of the world, we believe that the land belongs to the living, the dead, and the unborn. And so we give the portion of the living to them, small portion, and then we want to preserve the land that belongs, some portion of the land, and say that those portions belong to the dead and unborn. And so we farm on a limited scale, and then also we still believe in our traditional farm implements. I've been to villages where every year farmers would want to slaughter animals and sprinkle their blood on their farm, simple farm tools and implements. And then you ask them, why don't you mechanize? Why don't you believe in using of other heavy equipment? And they tell you that, well, these are the tools that our forefathers used, so we cannot depart from them. And so they use these simple farm implements and believe that that is what will give them better yield to be able to take care of their family. And so farming has also been subsistence, and it's simply been because people feel that if they depart from a subsistent way of doing things, maybe the gods and ancestors will punish them. I've seen communities where NGOs have gone to sing boreholes for them, and then members of the community have decided not to drink from the borehole. Why? Because they prefer their forefathers and ancestors drank from a particular river. Now you go see that river, animals, cattle are drinking from it, and the human beings also want to drink from that same river because they feel that the gods and ancestors will punish them should they abandon drinking from that river to accepting boreholes that may have been sunk for them, and thereby ignoring the fact that where they are drinking from may be unclean, but you have a clean source that you can drink from. People fall sick, and instead of going to hospitals to seek for medical care, they attribute the sources of their sickness to witches and witchcraft and other superstitious beliefs. And so they don't seek early medical attention. People go to prayer camps and they believe in traditionalists and herbs and other quite backward unscientific practices more than what is scientific and more than going to the hospital. And so oftentimes people lose their lives unnecessarily because rather than seeking medical attention, they prefer to be in the forest and to pray and look at the way we cherish our dead. People die and then we keep the dead in the morgue for years, and we spend huge sums of monies on the dead. We celebrate the dead, and we spend a lot of time that should have been used for productivity to do funerals. And these are all traditional practices and beliefs that tend to plague and to undermine our quest to be productive. And so the modernization theory is simply saying that if you want to develop, you have to abandon some of these practices and beliefs, and you'll be able to develop. The challenge has been that it is a truism that no nation develops without its culture. And so telling us to abandon our culture entirely and to subscribe to other people's cultural beliefs and practices would not necessarily make us develop. Okay, if we abandon our culture, altogether, it means you are asking us to imbibe other people's culture. Don't forget that when we talk about culture, we are talking about the sum totality of a people's way of life, including the food they eat, the language they speak, and the dresses that they wear. And so if you tell us to abandon our culture, it means you may be telling us to abandon the dresses that we wear, and then the food we eat. Once we abandon the dress that we wear, we do not even create local markets for people to manufacture African brands. And so we have to be important. In so doing, we are making other countries rich and then impoverishing ourselves. If we don't eat our local dishes and we want to eat the fried rice and chicken and foreign dishes, it means we are making other people richer, and then we don't create market for our own local produce. So it would, the modernization thinkers make some explanations, but it cannot be part of development for a nation to be told to eschew its culture entirely. Culture is a way of a people's life. And so if you tell us to abandon our culture, it means we are even also telling us to be speaking our own culture and local vernacular and languages. But the British is not interested in your local language. The American is not interested in your local language. And so that is how come sometimes we are all being compelled or forced to speak English. And you speak to people in English and they tell you, well, we understand, but you don't understand fully. Why? Because we are now imbibing other people's culture. There can be no meaningful discussion of development without cohesion and understanding. Cohesion and understanding comes through language. And so if we speak to ourselves in foreign languages that we don't fully comprehend, it also undermines our development. But if you go to other the so-called developed countries, they also have certain aspects of their culture that can be described as backward and anachronistic. If you go to these countries, they still believe in racial discrimination. They discriminate against people on racial grounds. They've not abandoned those practices. And I think in 2010, during the World Cup football competition, there was this practice of consulting octopus poll to determine the outcome of football matches. This is not different from what Africans do when they consult oracles to determine their destinies and all that. And so, yes, modernization theory offers some explanations. I believe that some aspect of our culture and beliefs and practices that are not too good can be eschewed, and then for us to embrace some modernities, but we cannot completely wipe away our culture in support of or in acceptance of other people's culture. No nation develops without its culture. I will look at the other explanations in the next lecture. Thank you.